My name is Brandon Stolicny. I'm a wood-fired potter here in Connecticut, and I do make many bonsai containers when I can. You are listening to the Bonsai Time Podcast.
Brandon, I know you kind of set yourself apart from a lot of other bonsai potters in that you do wood fire pottery. I've only seen or heard of one other guy who does wood fire pottery for bonsai.
Yeah,
So
there's a reason for that. It's lunacy.
yeah. From the one time I heard about it, it was like you had to keep adding wood to the fire like every few hours, right?
Sure. Yeah. I
Uh,
mean, it depends on the kiln that you're firing, but that's the general principle. Yeah, instead of electricity or gas, you're
gotcha.
using wood as your fuel source. The challenges happen more with the clay body and the firing process. It's a very, wood firing is considered atmospheric firing, so you get a lot of turbulence. The flame is ripping through there, and that can, especially with a rectangular shaped container like for bonsai, it wreaks havoc on it. Whereas it's a little more gentle. You don't have to worry about external effects on a pot in an electric kiln or a gas kiln.
Okay.
So yeah, you're a glutton for punishment.
Yeah. So I have always been kind of fascinated by pottery, like toyed with the idea maybe one day I'll get into it, but I haven't tried it yet.
Sure.
So I think a lot of our viewers are probably on my level where like, oh, we buy a bonsai pot for our trees, but we don't know the full
Right.
process.
Yeah, it's kind of a
So
natural progression. Like
mm,
you're buying containers. Oh, I want to make containers. But yeah, for sure.
so I was just hoping that you could start out with some of the technical explanations of the process. And you mentioned there's some chance of like warping for rectangular pots in a wood firing.
Oh
Um,
yeah, it's almost a guarantee. I have a few very stellar rectangles, and a lot of that is really based on luck. um, and you have to kind of compensate with the wall thickness. So
okay.
the thicker the walls are, and a lot of people like really thinner walled clay, pots. They're nice and light. Look how, because generally with ceramics, the lighter an object is, the higher the quality is, the perception. Because you're more masterful of your technique, you can throw really thin walls, but that doesn't really translate over to especially bonsai containers in a wood-fired kiln.
Hmm.
So it's a challenge. It's madness, really. That's why you don't see too much of it. It's punishing. It's very punishing.
Hmm. Do you see any particular benefits to doing the wood fire method though? I mean,
Yeah, you
obviously there
can't
must
really.
be something.
Yeah, the surface effects for sure. It's
Hmm.
more natural. 99% of my pots are unglazed. I almost never use glaze, so definitely more relying upon the kiln to do its thing. The whole purpose of wood firing is to look like a wood fired pot. So that's definitely you can't really fake it. It's very very authentic.
So let's say you had a certain color of clay,
Mhm.
like a light brown or a dark brown, and you
Sure.
put it in a traditional kiln,
Mhm.
and it comes out pretty true to that color, you'd say?
There's a lot of variables. Depends on how much ash falls on it, and the kind of ash from a particular tree will have different effects as well. So then you get into like the chemical makeup of what's in the tree, where was the tree grown, what did that tree absorb, uh,
Hmm.
and that depends on kind of the ash. Generally, ash can be anywhere from brown to gray, purple, sometimes green, blue. It really depends on the kind of tree and the atmosphere itself. Um,
Gotcha.
but also, as far as just like the raw clay body, not taking any ash into account, um, whenever you fire a wood kiln, you fire it generally in reduction. Reduction firing means you're essentially starving your kiln of oxygen, and the fire needs oxygen to survive. So it's searching for oxygen, and it pulls that oxygen out of the clay body. And that alters the clay body as well, making it richer, darker. You can end up with, if you have a dark clay body, it's going to be almost black.
Hmm.
It's a light brown, dark brown, you get reds. So there's all kinds of variables and wizardry involved.
Gotcha. Very cool. Is there any particular terminology that people have to know about pottery in general or about, wood-fired pots that we're going to go be using today, do you think?
Um, I mean, not particularly. Um,
I noticed,
yeah.
just to give you an example,
Hmm,
like in your email where you were showing some examples of your early pots
sure.
versus later ones, there were
Sure.
different styles with
Yeah.
some different terms.
Yeah, I mean, you have your traditional round shape, your round form that everyone knows so well because it's aptly named round. Um, generally taller pots tend to be more, for the cascade shape, semi-cascade shape. You have your oval. I mean, everything is just based upon the shape that we all learn in kindergarten.
Hmm.
Um, and then you can delve into the Japanese terminology for things. Um, but I try to, even though using Japanese methods for a Japanese art form, tend to use the American terms for them. So I try not to pretend to be Japanese.
Gotcha. Yeah, that way, everybody can understand it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's a good approach.
yeah.
So do you want to start going more into how you started doing wood fire pottery as opposed to, or like how you started doing pottery in general?
Um, yeah, I mean, we can just kind of like broach all of it, I guess. Um, well, I've been wood firing for the last 7 or 8 years. Became friends with a guy by the name of Tim Skull. He owns Canton Clay Works in the town out where I live. Just because I kind of always had an interest to it. About 20 years ago, I worked in a woman's production pottery, doing production work and stuff like that, and that kind of turned me off because it's constant repetition. It's its own skill set for sure, but it's very mind numbing. And
So
it
production means like making a bowl 100 times.
yes, yeah, same thing over, keep making them. And, when you're doing it under, and that's the traditional method, you're doing it under, this individual studio. So you're not getting credit for it, which is totally fine. That's the agreement. But, when you're making hundreds and hundreds of the same object for somebody else, it's a good way to learn your chops, but it gets very tedious very quickly, uh,
Hmm.
and wasn't really didn't really tickle anything in my brain. Um, but yeah, so about 7 or 8 years ago, I was, and around that time is when I had started getting more into bonsai as well. And like you had said, you get into bone, they're like, oh, I'm going to start making my own pots. Why not? Um, and just kind of dipped my toe into it, and then became fully obsessed with the whole insane process.
So did the pottery kind of lead to you getting into bonsai, like
It,
being
it kind
involved
of
in pottery,
happened
you saw some of this used
simultaneously.
before?
Yeah. I had always been interested in bonsai. I think I was around, I mean, maybe 8 or 9 years old, and it was some random. It wasn't a Home Depot because I don't even think they were really around. But it was definitely like a garden center, and it had a typical like twig of a Hercumbens juniper and some ugly mass-produced blue pot. And I was like, oh, that's that bonsai stuff.
Hmm.
And I had got one, but I was a little kid and I kept it in my room and it died. And I was like, oh, this is definitely above and beyond me. I needed, I don't know the secrets to anything like that. So it was kind of always in the back of my head. And then I had taken a trip several years back to the Brooklyn Botanic Gardens, and they have a small but very nice bonsai collection. And that kind of inspired me and got me. I was like, oh yeah, that thing, and kind of got back into it. And then I've always kind of been a do-it-yourselfer, as I need pots, and that's what happened.
Gotcha. And I did see that you had collected some pitch pine
Yeah,
Yamadori.
oh yeah, that
Very
became
impressive.
another obsession. Yeah,
Yeah.
the pitch pines. Yeah. Um,
So, oh, go ahead.
no, feel free.
I was just going to ask, like, what was the progression like in terms of your own comfort level to get to the point of where you're collecting big Yamadori?
Um, it seemed like a logical progression. Not having the proper connections or knowing the right people, it seems very difficult to find quality material. and then you hear about, Yamadori collecting. I was like, well, there's plenty of trees around, and we do have some mountainous areas in Connecticut by Connecticut standards. And it just, maybe I didn't think enough or know any better, so I just took it upon myself to try to figure it out. I've had pretty decent luck collecting pitch pine. I'm also super selective too. I really didn't want to take anything that risked dying. That would kind of rip me apart. I have lost one or two, but that's kind of inevitable, it seems.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm obsessed with pitch pine. Yeah, I love them. Right.
I was telling Kevin when I first moved back to Ohio that pitch pine was on my bucket list. So we are at the very westernmost edge of the pitch pine range. I just haven't found one here that's worth collecting yet. They pretty much grow full size.
Yeah. There's not a lot to really be found, especially here in the Northeast, being the oldest part of the country. They harvested the shit out of them, in colonial area, because they were a valuable tool for the lumber, the pitch. So you really have to dig for them. There are quite a bit anywhere on the peaks of like the Appalachian Trail. And as always is the case, it seems to me, all of the best ones are pretty much uncollectible. You're never moving them.
Yeah.
But they're out there. There's a lot of saplings that you can almost pluck with 2 fingers out of the ground if you want to play the long game.
Yeah, I have thought about growing them from seed because they do backload so nicely.
Yeah.
Even better than Japanese black pine.
Yeah, whenever, even if you don't want it, they do. One of my pitch pine, it buds profusely at the base, and it's just this lump of mass almost all year round, just constantly budding and budding. So whether you want it to or not, it's gonna backbud.
Yeah, one way or another, I'm gonna start doing them. I just haven't found seed source or a collectible tree yet.
Yeah, you got to find the right one.
Yeah.
But I haven't found, in my experience, they definitely don't seem to double flush consistently. So I think the black pine, Japanese black pine, has that beat.
Gotcha.
But from playing around trying to get a second flush out of them, they don't really every so often they do it, but nothing like the black pine.
That's interesting. I had heard from Dan Robinson that he pretty much treats them like the black pines in terms of pruning them at that same time of year.
Okay.
And maybe part of it is that the one that he's had for so long that maybe
very well could be it. Yeah, he's got. I've seen pictures of his pitch pine. It's amazing. But Dan's also a wizard too, so he can do what he wants.
Yeah, I think he just kind of figured something out, but
yeah, he's
doesn't always know how to share that.
Sure. Yeah, all those nuances. Yeah,
just gut instinct and lots of both the tree developing that habit and him developing the habit to take care of the tree. But
sure, absolutely. But yeah, the pitch pine seems to be the if you want to say tree of value, the most tree of value, in my neck of the woods. There's tons of deciduous that I haven't really explored at all, but deciduous are so time consuming. I don't with a wood-fired pottery thing, it's one or the other. I have a dozen or so trees. I have a few trees in the ground too, so I really have to be careful with managing my time.
Right. That is one thing I was wondering about a little bit, because what is your day job, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm a tattooer.
A tattooer. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking, like, when I do think about doing pottery, part of what holds me back is I don't have the time right now. So,
sure.
But you are very into pottery and into bonsai enough that you're collecting all these big Yamadori. And
sure.
of course, you have a different day job still.
Yeah. I stretched thin.
Yeah. Have you found any like nice work-life balance? I don't know, techniques.
I work frequently. One of those 3 aspects of my life, I'm always doing one or the other. But if you really enjoy it, it really doesn't matter too much. But the wood firing definitely consumes, I think, most of my time, for sure.
So going back to the wood firing,
Yeah.
let's say you loaded up the kiln. What would the process be like to fire that kiln full of unglazed pots?
Sure. Well, loading, which you quickly skipped over, is one of the most important parts of when it comes to firing a wood kiln. Depending on the stack of generally you have three stacks of work. You have your front, which is closest to the firebox, your middle stack, and then the rear stack, which is closest to the chimney. And obviously, closer to the fire, you have more ash, more flame, but that goes throughout the entire kiln. So loading a wood fire kiln is one of the most important things that you can do. Because essentially you want to load it as if each pot was a stone in the river, and you want it to get wet, even though we're talking about fire. So you want all of the pots to essentially get covered in flame as equally as possible to have the best possible overall unloading.
Okay.
So yeah, it takes about 2 days to fully load the kiln. About two 6 to 8 hour shifts of loading it. There's no set. Everyone wants to know how many pots you can fit in there. It all depends on the shape, the size, but several hundred pots go in. You load it up, and then you have to brick up the kiln, and then you can start preheating the kiln because you can't jump the temperature too quickly. So essentially you're holding around 200 degrees for about the first 12 hours or so, just to get everything warmed up. You get the chimney warmed up, and that starts pulling all of your air, all of the flame. And it's definitely the most boring aspect of wood firing is the whole preheat phase. But
The preheat phase is just kind of how exactly are you preheating it? Are you doing it with your wood fire?
yeah, there's a couple different ways to do it. Generally, all wood firing, you have somewhat of a community, so you always have to have a division of labor. And as things work out in all aspects of life, shit rolls downhill. So the least experienced individual tends to have to do the late night preheat hours, where it's as fun as watching paint dry. I mean, I've covered shifts like that, and it's totally fine. But when it's January and 9 degrees outside and it's 2 a.m, 200-degree fire doesn't keep you very warm at all. But yeah, you use little sticks of wood you feed in there, and you read off the barometer, and which tells you the internal temperature, and yeah, you're doing that just to slowly heat everything up.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can see how this starts to get very labor intensive. It's a good idea to have a community.
It's a very foolish thing to do. But yeah, it is incredibly labor intensive from even just preparing all of the wood that you need. Generally it's a couple cords of wood through a firing. Loading the kiln is labor intensive, splitting the wood, and then and that's you, and you haven't even started firing yet, and you're already put in dozens and dozens of hours.
So did you literally build like a brick oven in your backyard, or is there like among that community some shared one?
Yeah. My buddy Tim, he owns the kilns. He has two. He has a Noborigama, which is a multi-chambered climbing kiln. It's a very old Japanese style of kiln. It has two chambers. The first chamber is a wood chamber where you're only using, it's just raw wood. And the second chamber is a salt chamber, and you spray salt and or soda in there, and that's a whole different thing. I don't ever really use that kiln. It's just not what I'm looking for. The second kiln, which I run head on, and a lot of the responsibility is on me, is our train kiln, which is kind of a modified version of an anagama Japanese cave kiln. And it's essentially just a large tube space with a firebox and a chimney. And the whole purpose is to burn lots of wood and melt lots of ash, and cover those pots with ash. She's a bit of a monster.
With your time spent in learning the essence of fire, have you talked to firefighters and things? My little brother's a firefighter, so I asked.
Oh, okay.
There's a fire science behind everything related to fire.
Oh, 100%.
and
Yeah.
the action of that. Have you taken an interest in more pyro?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I mean, there is always that joke, everyone that's involved in wood firing is some form of pyromaniac, and I suppose to some extent that's true. But I think all humans, dating back to our earliest days, just have an affinity for fire at night. It's why we gather around bonfires. It's a very primal thing. And then you throw the communal, it takes a village to fire a kiln. So it's just a very ritualistic, ceremonial thing that we've done for thousands of years. But as far as talking to firefighters, no. When we do fire, we let the local fire department know that we're firing. One evening while firing at 2 a.m. or 2:30 in the morning, a police officer came running down the hill, wondering if everyone was all right. And we're very confused. I'm like, yeah, he's like, I saw all the smoke. And it's like, well, we're just firing the kiln, no big deal. And we're in a pretty rural area too. Not many people are firing wood kilns in, downtown Los Angeles or Manhattan or anything like that. But yeah, I really haven't talked to any firefighters. Their specialty is putting those bad boys out. We like to start them. But I mean, as far as like my education in wood firing goes, I had, I got the bug, started off just not really knowing anything. And at our kiln, we are kind of insane. We tend to fire almost every month. So in the course of a year, you can rack up more firings than most wood firers do in their career sometimes. So it is kind of boot camp. A few years back, I met a wood-fired potter. He's a kiln builder by the name of Justin Lambert. We became good friends. He has a brilliant mind for all things wood-fired. He can walk you through firing a kiln on the phone if you had to. And I'm fortunate to call him my friend. He's also become a mentor for me, and that's where a fountain of knowledge has come from. It's really it's invaluable.
Yeah, I would think so. Just in the fact of having that knowledge, but also gaining it through your experience of every month. That's a lot of wood. That's
A lot of work.
time.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
how often are you having to do repairs? I mean, because that's a big thing, right?
Yeah, there's constant maintenance to small degrees. Very rarely do you have to do any kind of big overhaul. But yeah, the kilns are made out of fire brick. They're rated up to a pretty crazy temperature, but we do fire at crazy temperatures. But you're always after the end of every firing, because you have kiln shelves that way you're putting your pots on. They're pretty devastated by the end of a firing. So there's lots of grinding, sanding, chipping. Maintenance is a son of a gun on a wood kiln for sure. But every few years you have to tackle on a larger project. You also cover it with with a layer of stucco to help insulate it. That cracks after one firing, and it keeps cracking and cracking, and then you got to re-stucco, and it's a constant battle for sure, man. It never stops.
With each crack and repair, does it give you any different consideration on how to approach your pottery as like a more rough style? I'm not trying to compare, but do you take any inspiration from Jonathan Cross or Baker Chamberlain in this naturalistic approach?
Try not. I kind of keep myself blissfully ignorant of what other potters are doing.
Nice.
I mean, I do. You can't help but come across Jonathan's work. It's great. It's awesome. He does seem kind of polarizing. Some people either love his stuff or hate his stuff. I love it. He's great. I know he does kind of, to me, it seems like he treats the bonsai container as like a side thing. It's not his primary focus. He'd rather be in galleries or whatnot, which is totally fine. But I mean, personally, I think once it's hard to beat like the right tree in the right pot. Like it definitely elevates into something completely different. And it becomes this, strange symbiotic art form. Yeah, I'm familiar with his work, but yeah, I prefer more rustic stuff. Absolutely. Kind of have to lean into that and embrace that if you are wood firing. There are ways to achieve a degree of more refinement in wood firing, but it just, you're better off to lean into what the kiln's going to give you than fight it. It's its own creature. It definitely has its say in what's going to come out of it.
That's what I was thinking, because you have no control other than just tending to what
Yeah,
the flames are doing and everything
sure.
else. Right?
Yeah, I mean, there are ways to, control it to an extent, but when you're talking about, you're talking about flame, it's going to do what it wants to do. And you can have a bit of an ego and say that you can control it. There are variables you can control, but at the end of the day, it is definitely kind of left to the fire gods. For sure.
Is your community doing any ceremonial thing prior or after, as like a thanking the kiln gods, if you will?
No, there's not really. Some folks do lean heavily into that. I mean, I definitely, I personally feel similar to that way. It's hard not to, with the whole, essentially when you're loading a kiln, you're almost making an altar, and then you're lighting the thing on fire, trying to appease these angry gods. They take sacrifice too. You're going to lose pots, you're going to get cut, you're going to get burned. So there are a lot of parallels. It can all be very like romanticized easily.
Just
There
like
are
bonsai.
exactly. So there's so many parallels between bonsai and wood fire. It's scary and interesting all at the same time. But yeah, a lot of people are very analytical. A lot of analytical minds. We don't have to appease the kiln gods. There are no kiln gods. I am the kiln god. That there's a lot of ego there, and that will get smashed rather quickly with that. You'll pay for that attitude. So sometimes it's best to give a little bit of sacrifice to the old gods. It's all
a lot of suspense then when you first open the kiln.
Yeah, it's that's everyone's favorite day. I mean, you live for it, you loathe it, you love it. Oftentimes the pot you expect is going to be your favorite when you put it in there. Probably won't be, because you have no idea for the most part what the surface is going to be. How destroyed did it get? Did it survive? The unloading day is a very mixed bag of emotions kind of day, for sure.
So kind of in that same vein, have you had it like in terms of your process, if you want to make a pot for a tree or for a particular, what's the word? Like, let's say Kevin paid you to buy a pot from you and
Sure.
a commission.
Yes.
That's the word.
Commissions.
So I imagine there must be a case where you think, oh, I'm going to put this pot in, it's going to be perfect for this tree. And then it doesn't turn out that way, or you end up choosing a different tree for it.
1000%. Yeah, I don't do commissions because of that. I can't. It's just impossible, especially, you can get the size and the shape right. Clay shrinks at a predictable rate, most, if you're using like a manufacturer's clay, they give you the formula that, the percentage of shrinkage, 12%, 15, whatever. So you can calculate that. You can get the size right. If you want an oval, you can accommodate that. But there's just no way to replicate a certain finish. And I've had people reach out and, and I don't like telling anybody no, of course, because that just hurts people's feelings or whatever. But and they always will say they want this particular surface, and they'll show me a picture of a jug. And a jug is a very different form. It's almost made for wood firing, the ash falls down. It's a curvaceous body. If, it flows. So you get, a lot of good things as opposed to a low pot, which is maybe 3-4 inches tall. It's more wide. So honestly, a lot of the ash just falls into the pot. So depending on the shape of the pot is going to determine the effect, where in the kiln it is. And just because this last firing, this one pot came out of this one spot looking like this does not mean it all depends upon like the load of the kiln, the pots that were in front of it, behind it, next to it, the kind of wood that we were able to, every load is different. Every firing is different. It's impossible to reproduce. And unfortunately, some people, they don't like hearing that, in this world of custom order, and I wish I could, believe me, but it can't be done really. Unfortunately. So yeah, I don't do custom orders for that reason. It's just not remotely possible.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
So then let's say you had a tree of yours that you wanted a pot for. Are
Sure.
you just constantly making pots, and if one happens to work, you take that out? And
When it comes to
what's the process like for
when it
that?
comes to my own trees, I'm not too particular. I have more than enough pots sitting around. The chances are I probably have something that will fit. If it's not the right look, that's okay for now, because I'll change it in 3 years or whatever. So because I have a surplus at my disposal, fortunately, you get kind of jaded that way. Like it's just a bonsai pot, whatever. They're sitting around everywhere. It doesn't matter. But yeah, so when it comes to my trees, I have very mix matched, definitely not the most aesthetic. They're not going to win any Koku prizes anytime soon. It's just whatever I happen to have laying around.
Gotcha. But the flip side of that is, in 3 years, when you're ready to change the pot, your
Yes.
pot surplus will be even bigger.
Yes,
you'll have more options.
exactly. Yeah, so down the road, that will definitely that's an option.
Gotcha.
With have you lived in Connecticut your whole life?
I was born here. I had moved all over when I was young. My mother was kind of nomadic, and I got dragged around a bit. But I mean, yeah, I would definitely consider myself a New Englander. I've been here for the last, many years.
Gotcha.
But yeah, Connecticut's a fine place to live. There's no natural disasters. It's just fine. Everything is just fine. It's boring and fine. It's a good place to make art. Not a great place to sell art. Connecticut's not very they're not quick to buy up any wood-fired pottery, really.
Not yet, right?
Not yet.
I was going to ask, with living in Connecticut for a long time now, as you said, have you seen the bonsai scene change for better, since it seems like the whole country is getting little pockets here and there are producing bigger outcomes of greatness?
Yep. I'm really not too active in any kind of bonsai club. I know there is a New Haven club, and I think there's a Hartford club, and from what I understand, they do good work. And it all goes back to the whole wood firing thing. I just don't have the time to go to club meetings, and if I can't do something fully, I just don't take part of it. I do have a few people locally that I know that they buy pots, and they go to those meetings. They do good work. They've had I can't think of anyone off the top of my head, but they've had national bonsai artists come and give demos. New England Bonsai Gardens up in Massachusetts does good work. And yeah, I mean the area is definitely it's like everywhere right now in the US. It seems bonsai is definitely on an upswing everywhere. Which is good.
Yeah, it's interesting because I still, being Oregon born originally, only the last 4 years living in this part of the country.
Yeah.
Ryan and I discussed this because he had lived in Seattle for 4 years or so.
Yep.
And coming back, it's exchange of differences.
Yeah.
I still plan to get up to
in Oregon. You're at ground zero for North American bonsai.
Exactly. Yeah, it was kind of a weird change of taking a step back and slowing down a bit. It was kind of nice in a presentation. Ryan and I discussed this too, and as Ryan had studied with Dan Robinson exclusively.
Yeah.
Completely different.
Yeah, lucky guy.
Yeah, we just actually.
The background is Dan's.
Yeah, that's actually at his place.
Yeah. London Gardens, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I was able to go with Ryan this last January to visit Dan. I've never visited there, and I'll get with him for 2 days. That was get the chance to get out there.
Yeah.
Got 2 more years in Ohio. If you get out to Oregon or PNW, you got a place to stay, no problem.
Yeah,
so,
I used to back in the before times, pre-COVID, I used to go out there a couple of times a year on vacation and travel. I have friends and family out that way. But yeah, it's been a while since I've been out there.
Nice. It's with your experience in travels and then how you approach your art, what is the biggest thing that you take inspiration from?
Definitely the natural world. I think it's impossible to escape, especially wood firing. It leans you, it forces you to go in that direction. If you have an interest in taking care of small trees, you're already there.
Right.
You know, yeah, it's just what when I had started off making pots, I made rectangles and tried to stay in that, in that traditional setup, the traditional form of bonsai containers. It's just, I think that's where everyone starts. But as started getting more serious and more serious, just try to figure out like where like my work personally fits into the silly world of North American bonsai. We don't have the conventions of the strict rules of Japan, so we're free to pretty much do whatever we want. So I had stopped making bonsai pots for about 2 years, and thought about like what I wanted my containers to look like, and I continued to make other pots, and leaned heavily into the Japanese tea ceremony, and there's a lot of miscellaneous shapes and items in that whole ritualistic affair. And then I was like, what if just hypothetically we can get the bonsai container? What if the bonsai container was in that tea ceremony? And there's a lot of the whole wabi-sabi shape, imperfect, temperament, and so that's and that's where like the non-bonds initially came from. Non-bonds are a completely different creature. That's more found object kind of thing. Pretty sure non-bonds were originally, they seem suspiciously similar to ongi jar lids, which are Korean fermentation lids. So I'm pretty sure they were just taking lids off of those, tapping holes into them, and putting trees in them. That's my hypothesis on that. But yeah, all those non-bonds were originally just repurposed kitchenware, mass produced real quick. So they're real, quote unquote, shoddy in shape and technique. But I really like that rough. It's just more visually interesting. Western eyes tend to like perfection, perfect circles, perfect arches, perfect squares. It's definitely like more of an Eastern thought. The idea of things being, just beautifully imperfect. And so I lean more heavily into that. And that's where more organic shapes came from. And they get complemented really well by flame and fire in a wood kiln. It works out.
Yeah, because I've been following your work for a while. I don't remember when we even started contacting each other.
Yeah,
and again,
yeah.
I thank you for the podcast, giving your time. But
Of course, man.
it's just like I saw your stuff and it had like this impact on me. I'll say, I showed Ryan your stuff. I think I showed Ryan. Did I show you? Yeah, I did. And I was just like, dude, check this out. And that's what it said to me. I was like, crap, this is great. Like just that texture, just that essence of, like you said, raw and rugged and just
Right.
real form.
Yep.
Like, I gotta talk to you.
Yeah, I appreciate. Yeah, you've been a supporter for a long time, and I do appreciate it very much, man.
Oh yeah. I mean, I hope to continue, working with you more with pots down the road. Just time and money and all that. But like,
I believe me.
if what were you doing before pottery? I mean, I know you're doing production. Have you always done something within the pottery realm, or were you doing stuff outside of ceramics?
Well, originally I was a fine artist. I had always drawn and painted. I used to paint a lot in oils, and really actually loathed pottery. It's funny how life works out, right? I didn't loathe it, but it just wasn't for me. That was more artsy crafty, and I think there's something inbred in art students where you're mandatory. You look down your nose at the arts and crafts kind of thing, and now I can't get enough of it. So it's an interesting thing. But yeah, I'd always drawn, been artistically inclined, and just always made stuff. I like making things with my hands.
So at the time that you were looking down on pottery, was that like mentally, or had you tried it and you're like, not going to do that?
I think maybe a little. I think it was a little bit of both.
Mm.
Especially when someone sits down at a potter's wheel for the first time, your first act is to center clay. As with anything with lots of repetition, it's really easy. But that first time you do it, you're like, oh, this is nonsense. I can't do this. This is stupid. Get it on. This is below me. But I mean, also that was, I think probably like early high school, maybe junior high school, was the first time I had tried, a potter's wheel. And when you're a stupid teenager full of angst and stuff, that, you're very set in your opinions and you have grandiose plans and ideas. And then you realize how like silly and pretentious the art world is. And at least pottery is more grounded, this is all my opinion. So, but yeah, I've met some of the best people I've ever met in my life, that are potters. They're very, very down to earth, good human beings. Same thing with bonsai. You don't really come across so many bad people that are taking care of trees.
Yeah, all I know is my daughter has lots of uncles, aunts, and grandpa now. More than just the end of the family.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Chase Rosate, the name of Chase Rosate, he's over in New Hope, Pennsylvania.
Yes.
I've gotten to become really good friends with him.
Oh,
We
excellent.
actually just just released this podcast with him.
Oh, well, is that over at what is it? Nature's Way, right?
That's Jim Doyle. So
okay.
that's about 2 hours west. But
Gotcha.
his is Rosate Bonsai Studio.
Oh, okay.
But he called me up a little while back, and he's like, "How's your daughter?" I'm like, "Good." I'm like, "You are Grandpa Chase." He's like, "I love that. I will be Grandpa Chase." All right, cool.
Right? Absolutely. Yeah, the extended family.
That's always, as just with the COVID stuff, it just seems like everyone came closer together. I mean, as far as with your pottery community and just even that aesthetic, did you feel the same?
To an extent, yeah. I mean, COVID was rough, man, for sure. Everyone was stuck at home and going crazy, and just the unknown. No one knew what the hell was going on. I think there were definitely benefits to it. People got to spend time pursuing what they thought they might love or never had the time for. Then they fell in love with it. We did notice it up because we take outside artists that are interested in wood firing, and we do have them in our kilns. We rent space out to them. And ever since, the lockdowns had ended, and people got into pottery over quarantine. During quarantine, you couldn't even get wheels or pottery supplies because people were just buying them up because they were stuck at home. And but yeah, when we reopened and everything, there's been more new potters interested in every aspect of pottery possible since pre-COVID.
I'll say I've caught the bug. I'm already planning to take a ceramics class. Actually, I'm going to the Ohio State. Watch out. Be careful. Get a tongue lashing. I've actually been planning to take what's called 3D art and ceramics class just to get the foundational setting of, within that, you feel as you are, would you consider yourself a fine art?
That's always the tricky one. Potters getting asked if they're artists. No, I don't. I think I'm a potter. I don't.
Full-time potter. Sorry.
Yeah. I don't. Yeah, there's like different levels of pretension. Potter, ceramicist, ceramic artist, and then artist, I guess. Just make pots, man. I think most there's a couple I can think of that think they're artists, but most wood-fired potters tend to be very down-to-earth, dirty people, just physically dirty. So when you do that labor, you're coming out looking like you worked in a coal mine. So it kind of shakes you of any kind of pretense of grandeur. You're not painting the Sistine Chapel. So
you're building it.
You're building it. Most potters are most wood-fired potters are very down-to-earth human beings. But yeah, so definitely the potter would be the term I would prefer.
Thank you for that information. No, it's good to know, because just like with bonsai, some people say, I don't like being called a bonsai artist, I like to be called a bonsai practitioner, or bonsai person.
It's a little, I see, it seems to be trickier with bonsai, because I don't think there's anything wrong with being called a bonsai artist. Bonsai practice, because how do you differentiate, top level practitioner from hobbyist?
Right. But then the other one is bonsai professional. It's like,
Well, yes, yeah,
Or
bonsai.
bonsai
Yeah,
master.
very
oh
true.
yeah,
Yeah. It's a tough one. I do bonsai. I don't know.
it's like
And
I'm a
then
guy. I'm a guy that
people
works with
have no
trees.
clue, look at you, very confused. Like,
Started calling myself a tree guy.
bonsai?
Yeah. You mean bonsai?
Yeah, exactly. Like, especially like I said, we have outside artists. They'll be like, "Oh, what's this pot with holes in the bottom?" Like, it's a bonsai container. They're like, "A what?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, it's a bonsai pot." They're like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
It's a real thing. But
When you're making a new shape or just making a pot, how do you approach that? Like, do you start with a wheel? Do you just slab?
I do a mixture of both, depending on what it is. A lot of times there's more thinking involved than actual making. Whether I'm driving or in the shower, just having that empty free time when you're not doing something, you're staring mindly at your phone. It's good to have that free time so your brain can wander, I think. And so if a particular shape or something comes to mind, depending on the shape, that would dictate whether it needs to be done on a wheel or if you have to slab build it, or a combination of the two. Like if you're making an oval, it's half and half kind of deal. But yeah, the shape kind of dictates what the technique is going to be for making it. And also there's some bigger ones, they're not quite slab built. You start with a block of clay. In Japanese it's called kurinuki. You scoop it all out. So that's also a valid labor intensive attempt at making pots. But you get some interesting texture on the outside with a when you do that kurinuki technique, when you can essentially you can carve away the exterior, do what you want to the exterior, and then you start scooping out the inside where your tree is going to go. It really all depends on the shape. The shape dictates the technique.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
I'll ask another technical question in that same vein of experimenting.
Sure.
So I'm kind of wondering if you experiment with different textures. Like you said, the kurinuki gives you a unique texture on the outside. Have you found that different textures catch the ash differently?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is why I tend not to make too many like perfectly looking smooth exteriors. I mean, those pots are absolutely beautiful. Like, especially if you look at if you look like the antique Chinese Nakawatari pots, plus now they have the patina on them. They're beautiful, but they're smooth. Even though those pots were wood fired, they were wood fired in what's called a sagger, because back when those pots were made, that was the only way you could make a pot was wood fired, but they didn't want the ash. They didn't want anything like that. They just wanted to vitrify the pot and make it ceramic. So they would put it in essentially a ceramic box. So it's getting all the temperature, but it's not getting any of the ash. So yes, those pots were wood fired, but you don't get any benefits of the atmospheric surfaces. But yeah, when you have those super smooth surfaces, they work better if you're going to glaze them, put them in a gas kiln, in my opinion. But when you have something that has ridges, ripples, overlaps, undercuts, the ash will fall into there or it will melt down into there. You get rivulets of ash running. And that's where a lot of the mojo, so to say, comes from, is having a variation in surface, for sure.
Gotcha.
With your experience and your time spent now, do you view yourself as a person who's always learning or a person who needs to learn?
Oh, always learning. Yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt. I mean, if you know everything, you might as well just stop, right? Like, what's the point in continuing? It's constantly exploration, in both, bonsai and ceramics, and then you throw the added complication of wood firing into it. Because I pretty much at this point, like I love making pots. I love making bonsai containers. I love firing the most. I love controlling a kiln and firing other people's pots and the ritual, the ceremony of it all. So essentially, I make pots because I like firing. I don't, that's kind of like where I've gotten at, and currently. You ask me at the end of a 12-hour shift, I'll probably say I hate firing. uh, but yeah, no, I'm obsessed with the whole process of firing a wood kiln. It's strangely addicting and terrible and beautiful all at the same time, for sure.
I've always wanted to be like a part of that ceremony at least once in my life, because
Absolutely.
it just seems so much energy with it all, and like seems like every time you fire, it's just going to be a new firing. But like,
It is. Yep.
is it like the first time, or is it, you know what I mean?
No, it always behaves. That's why, a lot of people that are when they're new to it, I talk them through, show them some stuff. And, I always explain to them, that's why, like, if you buy a gas kiln and you get it out of the box, or you buy your electric kiln, you get it out of the box, there's a user manual. And this is how you use it, because it behaves consistently and predictably every time. With a wood-fired kiln, the firing is always different because of all of these variables. That's why even if, even with the internet and all of its knowledge, you can't learn to fire a wood-fired kiln on the internet, which is probably a good thing. But that's why it doesn't exist, because every load is different. The wood you're using is different for the most part. It's just a unique creature every time, and you're only as good as your last firing, essentially.
So the best way to learn is by doing
like everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can read and get all theoretical about something that you want, but it's not, at the end of the day, you got to do it. And then if you do wood firing, it's most people, they do it once, they get hooked.
Yeah. Ryan was wondering, if, he was asking me, he's like, Kevin, do you know of his early pots compared to his later stuff or now? I was like,
My early pots are
you know,
horrible.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
like,
I don't
That's why I
have,
asked for pictures of those.
yeah, I don't have too many kicking around. I do have some more pictures somewhere. I don't have too many of those kicking. I thought I brought it up here. I had one of my earliest ones. It's a horrible oval that nothing would be able to live in it.
potpourri.
Yeah, it was also with the understanding of trying to figure out how this whole thing worked. I didn't have any intention of putting a tree in it. But looking at it, it's like, what the hell was I thinking? But I will dig around. I do have some pictures somewhere. I don't have too many physical examples, because I'm kind of I don't cherish. Even more recent pots, the ones that I don't think are great, they just get broke, smashed. After firing for years, you can't hold on to everything, or you're going to have a house full of just leftover pots that no one wants. No one wants many wood-fired pots to begin with. It's a really ludicrous thing to do. The market is.
Why do you think that is?
Education, explanation. It's a constant need to explain. It seems like the market value, everyone's different. Obviously, it depends on who you are, the name brand attached to it. But like the market value generally for like a wood-fired mug is about $50. Most people don't have the money to spend $50 on a mug, which is totally understandable. A lot of people will scoff at it. They're like, why? And then now you have to explain, here's this process. And there's just a constant need to explain yourself as a wood-fired potter, the amount of labor that goes into it, the amount of failure that's involved with it, the amount of years it takes you to get to make that $150 mug. It's a very strange thing. And then you throw bonsai containers into it. It's crazy. Wood firing is very niche. Bonsai is very niche. Wood-fired bonsai containers is a niche within a niche. So yeah, it's madness, but it's just, I enjoy doing it, so I do it.
What's the word for that? Whammy?
Yeah. It's silly. It's a silly thing. It makes zero conventional economic sense, but that's not why anyone wood fires, I don't think.
I don't know of anyone that gets every season though, you know.
Yeah,
So
right.
if you're doing it for that, you're in the wrong,
And
in
the
the wrong
thing is that
business.
the people that do get it, they get it, and that's awesome, you know. And that's really all that matters,
Right.
I think. So
With since you've been firing and, you know, taking on these new roles within your community, have they started making bonsai pots too, or are they more in line with
no,
just
I never
making
have. Yeah,
jugs
people,
and
people
things
are
like that?
very confused as, like I think I had said earlier, the big holes in the bottom. They're like, doesn't dirt just fall out, you know? And it's like, well, there's no dirt in a bonsai container, but and then you got to explain the, you know, the mesh that goes over it, and
Right.
you know, the purpose, and you know, the air oxygen exchange, and they then at that point they've already walked away because they're like, I never should have asked to begin with.
Can of worms.
They're like, you know, most people just they tend to make your standard tableware, which is of course is totally fine. But yeah, lots of cups and bowls and whatnot.
Are you also making those as well? I mean, I think the pot I bought from you, I think you graciously gave me a few teacups, if I recall. I've
Yeah,
used a few times.
yeah.
Um,
I usually make you know, I like making bottles a lot as well, like whiskey bottles, I guess you would call them, just because they perform really well in a wood fired kiln because of the shape. And it's just good to keep your skills sharp in other aspects. It all informs all of the practice, you know. So yeah, I make a little bit of everything. And sometimes I just don't want to make another bonsai pot, so I'll make a jug or a cup, but yeah, primarily make whatever I need to make, whatever's wanted at the moment.
Hmm.
where you can
So-
utilize in your
Yeah.
I was gonna ask, is the failure rate for those other everyday objects higher or lower or the same as
Definitely,
for bonsai?
definitely way lower.
Oh, okay.
Because of the shape of, say, a cup, you know, it's smallish, it's round. When you have a round object and the flame hits it, it just naturally flows around it.
Hmm.
So when you have more blunt sided, like always rectangles always get punished. They yeah, it's like a speed bump. You know, the flame just constantly hits it until it just, you know, I always kind of explain it as if you put a say you put a sheet flat on your floor and you put like a fan in front of it, how it would just blow it, and essentially that's happening the entire firing. So you're going to end up with some warped pots for sure. But yeah, you know, anything with that round surface, wheel thrown pots, they tend to behave very well in a wood kiln because of the round surface, the round nature of it. Ovals do pretty darn well too. But once you know, those rectangles, they take a pounding in a wood kiln.
Have you tried
that
any like? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to ask with the shapes. I'm assuming it's because of the airflow and how it
Exactly. Yeah.
responds to the shapes.
Yep.
shapely.
Airflow, fire flow. Yeah. Like when you have when you have a big fat rectangle, it just acts as a speed bump and just, you know, it's like a barricade, and it's like that through the whole firing, and slowly it just wears away until the levee breaks. You know.
It's all.
I was gonna ask, have you tried any more like free form pot shapes or other sculpture shapes, like almost trying to emulate a rock?
Yeah.
That kind of adds some complexity on the shape.
That's
discussion.
where like the like that curry nuki scoop out technique works really well, and especially if you fire very in the front of the right near the firebox at the front stack of the kiln, you will end up with some very rock-like texture that's very difficult to tell if you were to place it in nature. But yeah, I've played around with that. I have a few of those kicking around somewhere. I could send you guys all pictures of anything that we might mention throughout this. But yeah, it works great. I love trying to emulate nature, especially in conjunction with something that's going to hold the tree as a, you know. And it's always weird to me, the things that we value in our trees, the asymmetry, contortion, gnarliness, we always want to put them in these pretty pots, it seems, where personally I think a more gnarly naturalistic looking pot works better, but everyone's aesthetics are different. I personally think that's a home run to me.
Yeah, I do think rock plantings are gaining popularity, and while people are looking for actual rocks to plant on, they're also looking, maybe, I don't know about the whole bonsai community, but myself and, Dan Robinson,
Sure.
I definitely saw that he's getting more interested in pots that look like rocks. And
Now,
I just got one from Jim Doyle last year that I specifically got because it kind of had that rocky type texture.
sure, not that conventional pot look.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I agree.
yeah. I'd love to see some examples of yours that you had tried that with.
Yeah, there's a couple that I have experimented with. I didn't go too deep into it, but it's something I will continue to explore. They kind of ended up in a bit of a dry spot, meaning that the ash didn't fully melt, so you don't have like, essentially it's like just dry crustiness, whereas it doesn't quite have a smooth, it doesn't quite look like a presentable pot or a sellable pot, but there's potential in it for sure. It just has to be put in a better part of the kiln.
Gotcha.
What my question is like, what are some things that you want people to know about your pottery or your work, as far as like with our outreach we have now,
Sure.
we've noticed that it's around the world, people are listening, and so like our premise to our podcast is to help the community.
Yeah. Absolutely. I definitely don't make conventional pots. I'm not trying to make conventional pots. There are plenty of other potters that do that. They do it really well. They're easily found. I mean, I think now Tokotake, he's probably pound for pound heavyweight champ of traditional bonsai pottery. He does avant-garde stuff with glazes, so he's breaking free of that a little bit. But yeah, he's the guy. So if you want a conventional pot, hit him up, or good luck, anyways.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I don't make conventional pots. I definitely lean heavily into the whole wabi-sabi aesthetic. You're not going to get a perfect pot from me. It's definitely going to have a lot of surface variation, texture, look. It's wood-fired ceramics. It's just imperfect, just like humans are. So it works out really well for me. I'm a very imperfect person. Yeah, it's just, it's what I do, it's what I provide. Just more naturalistic, asymmetrical shapes, or handmade pots. I'm not trying to make it look like it's not a handmade pot. If you want a tokoname pot, buy it from Tokoname.
Right.
It just, like I said, I'm still trying to find where I fit in the whole scheme of things. It's like most wood firing, it's probably not for everybody, and that's totally valid and fine. But shame on you. It's awesome. It's awesome. Get with the program. But yeah, if you like what I do, that's great. If not, that's great too. Whether it was, whether there was social media or not, or a podcast interview or not, I'd still be doing it just because I like doing it. And just try to make interesting pots that hopefully you can make work for a tree. But that's not my job. That's your job.
Right. I will say, just even talking to you, and Brian and I, first time actually seeing you.
Yeah.
via just chat. We were supposed to meet nationals this last year, but it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I think corresponding schedules, whatever. But when I see your pots now talking to you like this, I see your pots emulate who you are as well.
Sure.
Laid back person, but also in this idea of, and the flow being the fire.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
And within that flow that takes you to where you want to be, you hope to be vending someday, like at shows, selling your work that way, or?
Maybe someday. I don't know. It's a very it seems like a very guarded niche community. You got to know the right people sometimes.
I understand that.
And about that.
For what it's worth, you're always welcome to come vend at the Columbus show.
Absolutely.
Please, it's a little far, but it's there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the offer for sure.
What what I hear from a lot of people who do some kind of art or craft or lifetime work of just the concentration.
Hmm.
Thing I asked them most, like, what do you do every day? It's like, I just show up and I just keep going. I'm like,
Yeah.
what keeps you going? I'm like, knowing that I have to do my work.
Yeah.
Is that for you the same as well?
Definitely a thing. Yeah, I never really felt. I mean, obviously, showing up is like more than half the battle. Like, do your job, right? Um, it's just super passionate. If you enjoy it, it doesn't really feel like work, and like I don't know. It's just something that definitely drives me. I don't quite know what the obsession is or what it is about making wood fired pots and making pots for little trees. I don't know. It's just I'm just gonna keep doing it. I love it, and try to do something different.
Sounds like it's a process, if I can say that.
It
Just the
really is
whole,
a process. Yeah, the whole thing is a process. Honestly, the easiest of all the processes is the making of the pie is once you learn, fundamentals, um, making a pot's pretty easy. It's really that's the easy part. Thinking about new form, new shape, how to do something slightly different, and um, you know more thought goes into making than actual act of making. And then the whole firing thing is a completely different aspect of it.
you when you're trying to think of a new pot, do you draw it out first or do you just go
No,
organic
yeah,
and just
I
try
don't
to make
really
it?
doodle or sketch. I know some people do that kind of deal. Um, I don't really do that too much. I don't think I've ever really done it. I think maybe when I first started off with like rectangle, trying to figure out dimensions and proper ratios, I would doodle that way. But I don't ever do that now. It's more just trying to figure out a proper silhouette, or I try to think of not so much the shape, but the negative space, or like the shadow it would make. Trying to think, trying to think differently, I think, is the most challenging part, because everyone can think kind of linear in regards to pottery, or I'm just going to make a pot and that's that. So just trying to think outside the box a little bit, and what to do next. How can I up it a little bit, and that's always the challenge.
Right? It's like life.
That's yeah, yeah,
And then
exactly.
there's COVID and now like
Yeah, no kidding, man. Yeah, life just keeps getting wild
every day.
every
With your approach on that, including life, do you have or are you making your own clays? Are you going digging anywhere like
Yeah,
out of
that's where a lot of, yeah, very, it's like Yamadori for clay, absolutely. Connecticut is it's the same idea. Uh, Connecticut's a weird place geologically. There's not a lot of high fire clay. There's a lot of low fire clay, like brick clay,
Okay.
in the central part of the state, which is pretty much where I'm in the Connecticut, or I'm sorry, the Farmington River Valley. I get the Farmington River like 100 feet from me. Like right in the riverbank, you can whip out some clay, but it would just turn to a pile of mud in the wood kiln. They used to make bricks in Hartford. There were brick factories all over the place. There is one spot I digging through geological record. You go on this weird like treasure hunt of records. It's like National Treasure or some shit. But yeah, geological records are your best friend, because everything has been surveyed. There was one spot that had a kaolin pit. Kaolin is essentially porcelain, and it was back in the 1800s. It was lauded as the purest porcelain you can get, and it is very pure. But the thing about pure is that it means it's very white. With like wood firing, you want some of those impurities to be in there because that causes flashing and variation of surface. So being pure isn't necessarily the best thing. But if you take some of that, the high fire porcelain, which by itself it's not even workable as a clay. You can't really do anything with it. But if you mix it with some of the brick clay, now you have an in-between kind of clay that could work very well. There are a lot of minerals that you use in glazes or clay bodies, feldspar being one of them. there's, whenever they do like a road cut or a road clearing, or they're mowing, or you can surprisingly find a lot of minerals and treasures and weirdos on the side of the road pulling bags of rock. It's a strange thing. Yeah, no stranger than pulling trees out of the woods, but yeah, foraging for materials is super fun. It just makes it different. You're actually a little bit more work, but it'll set you apart. I always encourage people to try to find some natural material more easily accessible. American commercial blend clays it's very homogeneous mixture made to work for almost anybody. They're not very fun. There's a few good ones out there, but they're not terribly exciting, which is kind of strange. We have this huge continent with all of this diverseness. You'd think there'd be better clays out there. But most people that have killer clay bodies are doing very stellar work. They tend to be doing it because they're harvesting it themselves. So
I will say, oh yeah, no, I would hope more people start in regards to just the outlook and search and destroy kind of not destroy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, for sure.
Search and
do it all responsibly, just like Yamadori and all that stuff.
I will say that there's been a lot of people through my inner circle just from Oregon that have started getting more into pottery that they're making.
Yep.
And I've seen maybe it's just that Oregon thing, just the Northwest thing, but I think pottery is going to be the next big and up and coming thing that people get.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, especially it runs parallel with geological activity. There's no shortage of that in the Pacific Northwest. You have tons of great pumice, lava. Yeah, right. There's big tracts of land and wilderness out there. I guarantee you there's some amazing clays and materials out there just waiting to be discovered.
I know they're starting to mine for small like operation, like they're just starting to
dipping their toe in the pool.
Yeah, on some part of Mount Hood there, they have the same biological makeup as what they have.
Wow,
which makes sense because it's all the rain.
Sure. Yeah.
Would you ever, if you were to ever visit Japan, or I know you can't.
I was supposed to go to Japan in 2020, and then the universe had other plans for me.
Psych out.
Yeah. So yeah, as soon as that's a thing again, hopefully soon. That'll happen. But I'm sorry, your question, yeah.
Oh no, I was more along the lines of that. Like, where would you go if you went to Japan? Like,
there's a guy by the name of John Dix, who's an American who is doing the craziness of being a potter in Japan. So he's running with the big guys. I can't imagine the challenges he faces there, but I might ask him. I'm going to be firing with. He's actually stateside this week. I'm firing with him. I'm leaving in a day to go fire with him in New York.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, I'm gonna chew his ear off about those. Being a foreigner in Japan, trying to do what they do best.
There's a guy doing that same thing with Bonsai, Adam Johnson.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's even braver. That's very brave. Yeah, an American bonsai professional working in Japan is mind blowing.
Same with the pottery too, though. So that might even extend farther back.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a secluded club. It seems, from particular lineages, and it's very homogenized, and there's a hierarchy. And being a foreigner, maybe you can get away with more because you're a foreigner and you can just play stupid. Don't mind me. I don't know what I'm doing.
I get away with it quite. I think I told you my wife's Japanese.
Yeah.
And so when I get over there, I can sometimes use that. But
Yeah.
Then I just say I'm Canadian. So.
Yeah, they get out a jail-free card. You're like, yeah.
Right.
That's awesome.
Oh yeah, it's not even an hour and a half. It's almost 7:30.
time.
I was, I was gonna say, I hope you had enjoyed your time as much as we did with you. I would love to talk with you more again sometime.
For sure, man. Yeah, there's always plenty to talk about and geek out about with this stuff. So
For sure.
hopefully it was somewhat entertaining for you guys.
Oh, for sure. Ryan, do you have any other questions?
I just wanted to say it's been a great learning experience for myself and hopefully our listeners. And there's a kind of a flavor of question that we try to ask at the end because, you mentioned a lot about how wood fire pottery can be fraught with failures,
Sure.
Challenges. So what's something that is making you excited to continue doing this or gives you optimism to keep going?
Oh, there's always plenty for that. Even if so it works a couple of different ways. If you pull one particularly amazing pot out of the kiln, that's going to keep you going. I need to reproduce that. I got this. I'm going to do it again. You probably won't, but you're going to be foolish. You're going to try to do it again. And the same thing with your failures, because oftentimes your failures, whether it's a breakage or whatever, there's something there on that surface that's just enough to like pull you back in. Like, oh, that pot would have been fantastic if it only survived. So I mean, it's like you learn more from your failures than your successes anyways, as with everything. Because if you succeed every time, you're not learning anything. So if you're not breaking pots or burning down your kiln, you're not doing it right. You're not trying hard enough.
I would agree. Just like life.
Yeah, just like
Every
life.
experience. How can people find you? What is the best way?
Just Instagram for now. I had a website, but I closed it down just because I'm lazy like that. So yeah, just Bonsai Pots on Instagram. I think I have a Facebook, but I'm never on it, so I don't know. And yeah, just Instagram. Easy as can be.
Cool.
And maybe for the listeners, we'll put the link in the show notes.
Definitely. That way we'll have a link directly to your page.
Sure, man.
So
absolutely. Yeah, I'll dig through and I'll send you guys some pictures of some more stuff, and maybe hopefully that'll be some assistance to you.
Yeah,
cool.
Definitely.
Cool.
Thanks for your time, guys, and all the craziness of vehicles.
Very fun.
But yeah, let's talk sooner later. Take it easy.
Absolutely, man.
I'll have to look at your feed to buy some pots next spring.
Sounds good, man. I appreciate it.
Oh, and feel free to let us know what you learned from your encounter with the gentleman.
Oh, I will. Absolutely. Yeah, I'll let you know.
Let's save it for next time. All right. Later, bud. Take it easy.
Have a good one.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Today's episode has been recorded, produced, and edited by Kevin Ferris and Ryan Houston. Our music was provided by MIDI Cancer. To find more music from MIDI Cancer, check out their SoundCloud and Bandcamp pages. To find more information on the podcast, please check out our Instagram page, Bonsai Time Podcast, and our website, bonsaitimepodcast.com. To stay in touch with us, Kevin's Instagram is Kevin_Ferris, PNW, and Ryan's website is right2tree2.com. You can find these links in the description below. Thank you for listening, and bonsai on!